Dr. Steve is going to tell us a story coming up.
But before I do, we've got a disclaimer, and that is we are not your doctors. And we want to make sure that if you've got any concerns about your health, that you definitely run them past your professionals and supplement what they tell you with some of the knowledge and wisdom that you get from us. But we're not prescribing or diagnosing or any of that stuff. So make sure you've got the team that you trust to move forward with. Secondly, we want to make sure that you know that we're on YouTube, and we'd sure like to have you be part of our YouTube community. So go ahead and push that little red button in the back bottom right-hand corner with a little red arrow in order to become part of our community, to be subscribers. And then you'll know when we're doing upcoming shows. And finally, wrong one. We'd love your feedback. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to talk to you even right now here today. So if you're watching this live, this would be a particularly good show to chime in on, and we'd love to converse with you about the topic of today. So by all means, join us and give us a little hi, a little wave. Nice to know that we're not here all by ourselves. So thanks for that. And with having said that, I've got a story, an old story that I just made up. Okay, so there's a guy who inherits a little cabin in the middle of the northern reaches of Alaska, and it's in a remote location in a freezing cold tundra, and there's no heat and there's no insulation. So the only way he can stay warm is by burning the few little scraps of wood that are left over from the previous owner, just little pieces of kindling in this makeshift fireplace. And that's what he uses to keep warm and what he uses to cook the cans of soup that are in the cabinets. And from time to time goes out to do a little ice fishing to supplement his cans of soup, because man cannot live by soup alone. Problem is that every time he goes outside to do his ice fishing, he ends up tripping over, kicking, or stubbing his toe on some kind of a large mass, some kind of a boulder. And he curses and he goes and does what he has to do. Sometimes he stubs his toe on the way back as well. Goes back in, cooks his fish, wraps himself up in his blankets, and curses his fate. And takes his pills, his pain pills, because these boulders keep on causing him pain. The source of his pain are these boulders, until one day a stranger comes along. And the stranger is invited in, and they sit together for a while under blankets. And the stranger can't help but notice how cold it is in there. He says, why are you letting yourself be so cold? The guy says, well, I don't really have any, I've got kindling. I've got no wood to light a fire to keep this place warm. And the stranger says, well, what about all those big stumps, those big logs laying all over your property? And so they go outside, and it turns out that those boulders that this guy's been tripping over all this time are logs that he could bring inside, chop up, and use to heat his house. And so what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that the source of his pain was his salvation. And instead of letting himself be triggered into pain and then have to take drugs to make the pain go away, what if he could use the source of the pain as the source of his growth, of his enlightenment, of his warmth, of his comfort? And I think that that's something that we all have the capacity to do when we learn how to, I like to use the word metabolize. You eat food and then you've got to metabolize it. If you couldn't metabolize your food, it would just be a big lump lying in your stomach, but it gets metabolized, gets broken down into its component parts, and we turn it into energy. And that's what warms us, right? Well, it just so happens that pain is the same way, particularly chronic, long-standing, lingering pain that's been with us a long time, which has outlived its usefulness as a warning signal for a problem. And instead, it's just this thing that is there that we curse, that we wish wasn't there, like the boulders outside, when in fact, they may be the very source of our next level of consciousness. And that's a big part of what Dr. Tim and I do. So that's my story. As I said, an old story that I just made up.
Great, Dr. Steve. And you know what I take away from your story? And that's the second time that I've heard that. And it was better this time than the first time, I'm going to say. Practice makes perfect with telling stories, I'm gathering. But what I take from that story is that there can be a benefit to being in chronic pain. if you have the enough wisdom to realize that there is a purpose. I'm firmly convinced that there's a purpose for everything, even so-called negative things, if you search enough. As a matter of fact, if you take a piece of paper and you write down all the negatives of some perceived problem, either physical or mental, and you take another piece of paper and you write down all the benefits and you really meditate on the benefits, they eventually will even out. I learned this from a guy named Dr. John DeMartini, and he was the one who said, "Hey, if you get to the balance of things, that is the essence of really understanding our world and our universe. Actually, it's a universal truth to him." So that's what I take from your story, Dr. Steve, is universal truth. That there is a benefit for every perceived weakness or for every perceived lack. Yeah.
Universal truth is my jam.
Yeah.
So that's the third Zen patriarch who lived back between about the late 400s AD and early 600s. He lived over 100 years, and he was a source of great wisdom, and his words have filtered all the way down to this day. And he wrote something called the essay on faith mind. And it starts by saying, to set what you like against what you don't like is the disease of the mind. Right? When the great way, as he says, the great way, meaning the path to happiness, to enlightenment, to peace, is not difficult for those who have no preferences, but set things apart, even a slight amount, and heaven and earth move apart from one another. It just becomes impossible to reach your goals. Meaning that all of those things that we have decided through our what's the word for it? Not binaural, but that kind of
bicameral.
Maybe now that's not the word I'm looking for either, but in any event, the idea that everything is either good or bad, black or white, and in reality, everything is only what it is in relation to something else, right? Are you tall or are you short? I don't know. Who am I hanging out with?
Right. It depends on if you want to be a jockey or play in the NBA. Which one's a blessing and which one's a curse.
Yeah, you could be a tall jockey, which is still a short basketball player.
Right.
So in every situation, there is a place from which you can look at it where it doesn't represent a negative, right? And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about, let's find a place from which we can stand, in which we can stand, to be able to see both the positive and the negative in every situation, including pain. And of course, that's what drew me to your work, was fun with pain. The idea of fun with pain. Whoever thought of such a thing?
Right. It's just it's just a facet of having the wisdom to look and see the benefit of something that everybody considers an absolute negative.
Yeah.
One thing before I get into my story, I have I read this morning in some professional journal that comes across my desk all the time, and sometimes there's good stuff in here and sometimes there isn't. But there were some statistics that really confirmed, Dr. Steve, that you and I are in the right place doing the right thing at the right time. Okay. So here we are coming off of this, well, not even coming off. We're still right in the middle of COVID and continued lockdowns, and it's going to be a tough winter. There's nobody that denies that. But here's some statistics that was going on that I found in a journal this morning. Almost half of all U.S. opioid overdose deaths involve a prescription opioid. Back pain is one of the leading reasons why people are prescribed opioids. Research shows that opioids do not provide clinical, meaningful pain relief for people with chronic back pain. So we're getting an increased prescription of a very dangerous chemical substance that doesn't help, the study shows, and yet it's more and more and more and more. I was heartened, though, is the fact that more people are focused on lifestyle activities and working on maybe their exercise a little bit, trying to lose weight finally, all these comorbidities that can that help make people sick and get sicker with the COVID thing. So I'm heartened by that, but I'm disgusted and horrified that we're not learning our lessons with the opioid crisis. In fact, it's getting worse and it doesn't work. So with that said, I would like to tell a story of my own, Dr. Steve, with your permission, of course. And this one is a true story. And it's a little embarrassing because it involves me. And I'm not going to just tell you a story about me. And this was about 8 years ago, without a lesson to it. So there's a purpose and a lesson in it that I want to share. So actually, the reason that I teach this is because I want you to understand, our people out there in virtual, that we are real people. And Dr. Steve and I are real people, and we know how. We've worked with people for many years, exactly 75 years for both of us when you combine our experience. But another thing that happened to me was I have experienced very severe pain. And 8 years ago, I won't tell you all the lead up to it, but I found myself on my floor of my living room, and with severe back pain. I couldn't move a muscle. And my cell phone was about a foot away from my hand. And it took me an hour to reach that cell phone. And my girlfriend was on the West Coast and I was on the East Coast, couldn't call her. I went down the list and tried to call people who weren't at work. It was the middle of the day. And finally got a friend to come over and take care of me. And I was freezing to death. So the first thing and luckily my house is unlocked. So he walked in the house because I couldn't have gotten up to let anybody in. I couldn't move. So when my friend, who was another doctor, came in, I said, get a blanket on me quick, because I was hypothermic on my own floor. The heat was just sucked right out of me. I could not move a muscle. And he just stayed there with me for a while. What I had to do at that particular stage, and I'm not saying that there's no place for strong medication, because I had to take strong medication to get off the floor. And I could barely get off the floor. And with my friend's help, I got into bed and had a glass of water above my head. And because of the pain medication, I promptly fell asleep because I was exhausted. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I awoke and could barely move. I couldn't move any part of my body because what I had forgotten to do was to stay hydrated. I was severely dehydrated and my whole body was in tetany. So I started out with a severe back pain. And because of opioids, which was the good thing, I was able to get off the floor, but I passed out again without drinking, and I was badly dehydrated. Every muscle in my body, in addition to the chronic back pain, was I was in tetanus. It was like I was in tetany. I couldn't move a muscle. And this time my cell phone was again 6 inches above my head. It took me hours to get to my cell phone. And I called a friend and he came over and kind of rescued me out of that. But I was one step from 911. That was my next call, but luckily it's good for friends. So the moral of the story, number one, is that the ouch doctors know what pain is. I know what pain is. The moral of that story, number two, is, and a lot of our clients think, your mind body stuff's not going to work for me because my pain is too severe. Well, I know what severe pain is, and what eventually I needed some opioids to get me off the floor. But what got me to a place where I can function and be an athlete again and help other people is the mind-body work. Mind-body work is what I dedicated to myself right after that experience, and is the reason I'm here today. And I'm so thankful for that experience. And it's burnt in my head so deeply, and it's burnt into that remembrance is burnt in so deeply, because I know there's a lot of people out there that have really severe pain, think that mind-body work's not going to work for them, or think there's no other place to go, or think that possibly surgery is going to fix their problem. I had so many people, patients in my brick and mortar practice, who were thinking, yeah, I'm going to do this stuff for a while, this mind-body stuff for a while, but if it doesn't get better, then I'm just going to have surgery, and so it'll be fixed once and for all. Well, the opposite is true of that. So we know that. And there's a lot of surgeons who do mind-body work right now that have completely rejected the surgery aspect of surgery for pain relief because it doesn't work.
Mm.
Mind, body stuff works, and I'm here to be part of the proof in that. So how awesome was that? Because I learned from that experience, very miserable experience at the time, but that was for me the genesis of sharing this work because so many people need it. And as from the statistics that I just shared about opioids increasing in the time of COVID, this message is needed so much more than more people think. So the fact is, if I was unable to get my cell phone when I was in such severe pain, if that cell phone was 2 inches more away from me, I could have died from dehydration from back pain.
Mm.
How embarrassing would that have been
Yeah.
on my epitaph? Ouch, man, that would have been terrible. So, falling off of Mount Everest might be okay, but dying from back pain in your own bed because you can't move and get your phone, embarrassing, dude.
Or hypothermia on your own floor.
Or hypothermia on my own floor.
Yeah.
Totally embarrassing. So
Well,
anyway, that's my story for today.
A lot to that story. And, one of the things that I was thinking about as you brought up, especially in times of COVID and where we're at right now, is I'm curious about, where people are at now. I know there are statistics about it and I've got my own personal experience, but are people, and if you're watching this, feel free to share your experience. Are you healthier now during COVID? Are you less healthy? Are you more inclined to suffer? Are you less inclined? I mean, what's going on in your world? It's an interesting time in that sense, because some people the stress is higher, but maybe the opportunity is greater to make changes. And I think for some people that's it. It's like, okay, boy, I've got a little time on my hands. Maybe I'll exercise. Maybe I'll learn a little bit of this mind body stuff. By the way, Dr. Tim, what I think we ought to do is also mention, of course, Dr. Tim and I do this with clients one-on-one, and that's a big part of our work is one-on-one care. But we also created a mini course called the Pain Switch, and we want you to know about it. So the Pain Switch is available if you just go to getthepainswitch.com. And at getthepainswitch.com, you'll learn a little bit about this mini course called the Pain Switch, which is not the same, obviously, as working with us one-on-one and getting all the nuances and all the hand-holding and coaching that we offer. But it does teach you some of the skills that both Dr. Tim and I have separately and together mastered about what do you do when you're in a situation like that? How do you use your mind to change the prognosis, the experience of pain?
Right. And thanks for bringing that up, Dr. Steve. And that was my next thing to segue into. And I think the Pain Switch for me is a quick win. It's an easy way to digest and get yourself and feel the difference. People who do the Pain Switch feel the difference, feel better. They know this is going to work. Now, some people elect to go along with Dr. Steve and I and coach longer. Some people need a little bit more hand holding and more information, and depending upon their situation. But the painswitch.com, getthepainswitch.com will give you a quick win, and you'll know beyond a shadow of a doubt that mind-body work can decrease your physical pain, regardless of how severe the pain is, how long you've had it, what body part, what other doctors have told you about it, even if you have diagnosis of arthritis or fibromyalgia or migraines or back pain or neck pain. That sums up a lot of the conditions that people really suffer with. And all of those conditions can benefit and more from a mind-body approach. And when you use the Pain Switch and the information and the little exercises, and you really delve in there, and it doesn't take very long, you're going to feel the difference in a short period of time. You're going to get a win, and maybe it's been a while since you've had a win. You're going to get a win with the Pain Switch. And that's going to be fun to see. And we'd love to have your feedback with that. Reach out to us and tell us how your experience is.
And one of the reasons that we created this the way we did and made it as inexpensive as we made it, $57, is that it's so easy for so many people to make excuses for why it won't work. Well, this is preposterous. I can't get better. I've already been through everything. I've got a bad diagnosis. I've been told I have fibromyalgia. I've got, pain from cancer. And the reality is that it doesn't really matter what the cause of the pain is, because we're not treating the disease or the disorder. What we're doing is we're treating the mind body connection to how pain is manifested in the body. Now, that does have a secondary effect on disease processes in the long run, but we're not saying we're curing any diseases. What we're saying is we're significantly reducing your stress, we're significantly increasing your quality of life, and that's going to make you more likely to take actions that are wellness based. Right. So ultimately, we want you to be well, we want you to be healthy, we want you to be in charge of yourself. But let's start by giving you a way of flipping that pain switch.
Right. And with that said, even though we're not curing or healing anything, any known condition, there we have many clients that have never had pain again. Can't promise that, but it is a outcome that's not uncommon in the mind-body world. So I hope it happens for you. But even if it doesn't, between 30 and 90% of chronic pain can be helped with mind-body methods. So,
and you'll find people fall into a couple different categories, right? Some people who are experiencing chronic pain because of the nature of their pain or because of the nature of their personality, they may not be in a position right now to completely resolve it. Now, we don't use the word cure because we're not curing anything, but to resolve that pain so it doesn't come back, right? Versus somebody who needs to manage it, who needs to have a maintenance process that they can use that'll bring it down. Now, if you're going to use a maintenance process, in other words, if you've got pain and then you do something that makes the pain go away for a while and then it comes back again and that keeps happening, what's the thing you're doing that's giving you that? What are you using to manage your pain? And that matters, because if you're managing your pain through mindset, so you get that half a day of relief because you've done certain mental processes that you need to do again tomorrow, maybe, isn't that better than taking the opioids?
Right.
Isn't that better than taking even the aspirin? Because there's not a drug out there that doesn't have a potential side effect.
Right. And the really uncomfortable, painful side effect of this is that the longer that you go, the longer that a person goes with chronic pain, the more it perpetuates itself, ingrains more into the nervous system.
Right.
The nervous system learns more about that pain, and it's harder to get to the end of that and get fixed. So there's no time like right now to get a quick win.
I love that point. It's a point that that most people are unaware of. It's called neurogenic pain. Pain is, it starts out as being generated by a physical injury or something of that sort. So often, there's a trauma, and that's where your initial pain comes from. But neurogenic pain means that your brain has so completely adapted itself to the presence of this pain that it's built a series of pain pathways. And those pain pathways are the path of least resistance. And so the brain itself becomes the generator of the experience of pain. It's not
It's like an autoimmune system of adding more layers of chronicity to a chronic pain thing.
That's right. I thought of that connection, but for sure.
So you've got to really step in there. The quicker, the better to step in there, produce new circuits through mind-body methods, start to reverse the process of chronic pain that has made it so bad and so long and suffering for so long.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fun. It's a fun conversation. If any of you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section. I would love to address them for you, and we'll make sure that we come back and touch base. And if you were too shy to say anything right now, that's okay. We'll double back and we'll respond to you if and when you let us know that you've got a question. So we'd like to do that for you. Next week, we're hoping to have a guest next week. I'm trying to get our friend Court Davies, who is an international speaker who happens to be a cancer patient himself, to come on and talk a little bit about the mind-body connection himself. It's a powerful subject. And one of these days, Dr. Tim and I, either next week or the week after, are going to do a show called The Metaphor Show. And we're just going to throw a lot of metaphors, a lot of stories, a lot of, similes at you so that you could understand, like in the story that I told you at the beginning, that your pain is like that log, that if you burned it, it would actually make things better, not worse. there are so many ways of framing pain, and you might have a metaphor, and maybe we'll give a prize to the best metaphor. So if you've come up with a good one, by all means, let us know, and we'll share your metaphor with the rest of the group as well. Anything else to say here, Dr. Tim?
Well, just one, and I think you know where I'm coming with this.
Let's go for it.
Train your brain.
Lose your pain.
Can't wait to see you all next week.
Take care.